2014, Rikers Island, New York City. The sound of metal slamming against metal echoes through the tier. A man screamed for help. Somewhere deep inside the walls of Rikers, an inmate bangs his fist against the cell door, over and over, until his knuckles split open. The lights flicker. The air smells of sweat, bleach, and fear. "Officer!" he yells. No one answers. He's been in solitary for 3 months. No sunlight. No voice to talk to. Just the sound of his own breathing. And sometimes the breathing of someone else. He says he hears whispers through the vent. Names. Numbers. Laughter that doesn't belong to anyone alive. When guards finally open the cell door, the man just stands there, staring blankly. His lips tremble. He doesn't even remember his own name. They call this the box, but the inmates call it the tomb. And this is where the madness of Rikers begins. This story took weeks to piece together from real accounts inside Rikers Island. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe now, because what happens inside these walls rarely makes it out alive. The beginning before the isolation. Rikers Island isn't just a jail. It's a world that exists between freedom and a lifetime sentence. Every man here is waiting for trial, for time to pass, for someone to remember they exist. When Michael Rivera first arrived in 2013, he thought it would be a short stay. He was 22, charged with robbery. He imagined noisy cell blocks, tough inmates, and bad food, but not this. The intake room smelled like metal and disinfectant. Guards shouted numbers instead of names. Next, step forward. Empty your pockets. Hands on the table. Michael kept his head down, but one wrong glance, 1 second too long looking at another inmate, could get you hurt. That's the rule no one tells you when you arrive at Rikers. Never stare. Never speak first. Never act scared. Inside, fear is the scent that draws attention. The madness of routine. Days turn into weeks. Michael learned how the system worked, not from the guards, but from the inmates. Everything here is about power. One of them told him. And the guards, they play the same game we do. He didn't believe it, not until he saw it for himself. One morning, 2 inmates fought over a carton of milk. The guard didn't break it up. They watched. One of them laughed. When it was over, one man lay bleeding on the floor, and the other was dragged to solitary. That's when Michael realized. At Rikers, silence is survival. If you talk, you're marked. If you complain, you're punished. If you fight, you disappear into the box. 3 months later, Michael got into an argument with a guard. He said the guard had taken his commissary. The guard said he was acting out. And just like that, he was thrown into solitary confinement. 6 by 9 feet, a steel toilet, a concrete bed, no human contact, no window, no sound, except his own thoughts. For the first few days, he counted the cracks in the wall. By the 2nd week, he started talking to them. By the 3rd, he heard them talking back. He said time moved differently in there. Hours felt like days, days felt like months. The guard slid food through a small slot 3 times a day and never looked at him. He tried to write letters, but stopped when he realized he didn't know what day it was anymore. When the door finally opened again, he wasn't the same person. He'd lost weight. His eyes were hollow. And when another inmate asked his name, he didn't answer. He just stared. That's what Rikers does to you. It doesn't just cage your body. It erases your mind. Reflection, the isolation that never ends. Even after Michael got out, he said the silence never left him. He'd wake up at night hearing the echo of the cell door slamming shut. He couldn't stand being in quiet rooms or crowded ones. He said he felt like part of him was still in that 6 by 9 box, waiting for the lights to flicker again. In Rikers, men don't just serve time, they lose time. And for some, time never comes back. A new investigation revealed dozens of cases just like Michael's. Inmates locked in solitary for months, even years. Some lost their minds. Some took their own lives. And some just vanished into the system, their names never called again. A guard once said, "Rikers isn't haunted by ghosts. It makes them." As more stories surfaced, the truth began to unravel. The madness inside Rikers wasn't just born from the inmates. It was built into the walls. In the next part, we go deeper inside the tomb, the part of Rikers even the guards fear entering, where the lights never fully come on, and the screams never fully stop. Because sometimes what drives a man insane isn't what's outside the cell. It's what's inside his own mind. The rules of survival. It was Michael's 5th night in Rikers when he learned his first real lesson. Nobody survives alone. He was still adjusting to the rhythm of chaos. The clanging metal doors, the smell of sweat mixed with bleach, the constant yelling that echoed to the tears like thunder. Every sound felt dangerous. Every stare meant something. In Rikers, noise was power. Silence was weakness. Michael slept with his shoes on. He used his blanket as a pillow, not for comfort, but so no one could steal it. That night, he watched 2 men get into a fight over a pack of ramen noodles. One punch, and suddenly the entire dorm erupted, shouting chaos, guards rushing in with batons. Michael ducked under his bunk as someone screamed. When it was over, one man was dragged away, bleeding, handcuffed, face pressed to the concrete. The other was sent to the Bing, solitary confinement. Michael sat still, shaking, and that's when a voice from the bunk below said quietly, "Welcome to Rikers, bro. Now you know the rules." The next morning, he met Devin, a skinny guy from the Bronx with tattoos running down both arms. Devin had been in and out of Rikers 6 times. He wasn't a gang member, just a survivor. He said, "You see that guard over there? He's the one you never argue with. You see that table? Never sit there unless someone tells you to." Then he leaned closer, whispering, "And if they send you to the box, don't talk to the walls. They'll start talking back." Michael laughed at first. He thought Devin was joking. He wasn't. Days at Rikers blurred together. No real sense of morning or night. Sometimes the light stayed on for 24 hours. Sometimes the food came late, or not at all. The guards moved through the blocks like ghosts, silent, watchful. Some of them were just trying to do their jobs. Others seemed to enjoy watching the place eat people alive. Devin explained how it worked. You can't fight the system here. You either play the game or the game plays you. And the game? It wasn't fair. Michael saw men punished for speaking up, locked down for disrespecting authority. He saw others bribing guards with commissary snacks for favors, an extra blanket, a longer phone call, an extra shower. It was a world with its own laws, invisible ones, written by fear and survival. One afternoon, Michael's section went on lockdown. No one knew why. The air felt heavy, tense. Whispers spread through the cells. Someone had attacked a correctional officer in another unit. Rumors had happened in the mess hall. A fork, a fight, then total chaos. For the next 48 hours, no one was allowed to leave their cells. The light stayed on all night. The air vents pumped cold air so strong, Michael could see his breath. That's when he started to understand what Devin meant. The silence wasn't peace. It was pressure. It built up in your head until your thoughts started turning on you. He could hear someone a few cells down, whispering to himself. Another man banged the wall and yelled out random words, just to break the quiet. Rikers had a way of making time feel endless. Every second felt like a test of patience, of sanity, of identity. When the lockdown finally ended, Michael walked past a mirror in the hallway. He stopped. For a second, he didn't recognize his own reflection. The lighting was harsh and pale. His face looked thinner, older. He tried to smile, but it didn't look right. Devin nudged him. "Don't stare too long, bro. You'll forget who you're looking at." That night, something happened that would change everything. The tier was quiet, unusually quiet. Even the guards were gone from the main corridor. Then, a crash, a scream, and the sound of boots running. Michael jumped out of his bunk. From a window slit, he saw 2 guards rushing toward cell 14. Someone inside was yelling, begging, crying. The officers shouted for backup. Then silence. Minutes passed. No one spoke. When the door finally opened, a stretcher rolled out. The man's face was covered. Michael stood frozen. Devin whispered, They say he lost it in the box, came back, and couldn't take the noise anymore. The hallway fell silent again, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. From that moment on, something in Michael changed. He started writing small notes on napkins, anything to keep his thoughts straight. Sometimes he drew clocks with no hands. Sometimes he wrote his own name over and over just to remember it. Every night he'd whisper, "I'm still here. I'm still me." Because at Rikers, identity wasn't something you owned. It was something you fought to keep. Weeks later, Devin was transferred. Michael never saw him again. The only thing he left behind was a message scratched into the concrete wall. If the silence doesn't break you, the waiting will. And as Michael lay back on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, he realized that maybe Rikers wasn't just a jail. It was a mirror, showing every man the darkest part of himself. But soon, that mirror was about to shatter, because one night, a riot would break out, a real one, the kind that would expose everything hidden inside those walls, and prove that sometimes the only thing more dangerous than the inmates is the system itself. The riot, it started with a sound, a metal tray slamming against the floor, then another and another. Before Michael even understood what was happening, the noise grew, echoing off the concrete walls like thunder in a cage. The mess hall had exploded into chaos. It was August 12th, 2009, and Rikers Island was about to experience one of its most violent days of the year. Guards yelled for everyone to get down. Inmates shouted over each other, some throwing food, others flipping tables. Plastic trays clattered like gunfire against the floor. Michael ducked behind a pillar, heart pounding so hard it felt like his chest might burst. He could see men climbing onto tables, fists raised, shouting words he couldn't even make out. One guard tried to push through, swinging his baton. Then a chair flew across the room. It hit the guard square in the shoulder. He went down, and in that split second, all order vanished. The riot spread like wildfire. One man grabbed a broomstick. Another broke a tray into jagged edges. Michael pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay invisible. A siren blared from somewhere above. Red lights flashed. The air filled with the sound of panic. Shouting metal footsteps. He remembered what Devin once told him. When it goes down, don't move. Don't talk. Don't get seen. But it was already too late. Someone grabbed his arm. A big guy with scars across his neck. "Yo, you with us or not?" the man barked. Michael didn't even have time to answer before the man pushed him aside and ran toward the chaos. Within minutes, smoke began to fill the room. The guards had thrown canisters, thick, burning clouds that made everyone choke and stumble. Michael dropped to his knees, coughing. His eyes burned. He crawled under one of the metal tables, gasping for air. All he could see were legs running, boots stomping, people falling. The world was spinning. Red lights, screams, the smell of tear gas. A body fell next to him, heavy, motionless. He didn't look. He didn't want to. He just waited for the chaos to stop. When it finally did, the silence felt worse. Michael lifted his head slowly. Smoke still hung in the air like fog after a storm. He could hear the clinking of handcuffs, the barking of orders, the sound of zip ties being pulled tight. Guards moved through the mess hall in masks and shields. Every inmate was face down, hands behind their heads. Michael obeyed, his cheek pressed to the cold concrete floor. His hands shook, but he didn't dare move. One of the guards knelt beside him. "Don't move," he said sharply. The man's voice cracked slightly, not from anger but fear. Even the guards were scared, because when Rikers burns, nobody feels safe. Hours later, Michael sat in a holding cell with a dozen others. Some coughed quietly. Others stared blankly at the wall, their faces smeared with sweat and dust. A young guard stood outside the bars. He looked no older than 25. His hands trembled slightly as he held his baton. Michael caught his eye for a moment. The guard looked away. And that's when it hit him. The guards weren't just keeping him inside. They were trapped in here, too. When the lockdown came, it was total. No phones. No movement. No noise except the buzz of the lights overhead. The riot had left 3 inmates injured and 2 guards hospitalized. Rumors spread that one section had been flooded with pepper spray and sealed for days. Michael was transferred to a different dorm, smaller, darker. The air felt colder here, like the walls themselves had soaked up fear. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, his ears still ringing. He could still hear the screams. He could still smell the smoke. And in the silence, he realized something. Rikers didn't just punish the body. It punished the mind. The next morning, a guard came by for roll call. Same man from the riot. Same trembling hands. Michael noticed the man's eyes were red, sleepless. He stopped briefly at Michael's cell. "You good?" he muttered under his breath. Michael nodded. The guard hesitated, then whispered, "Don't let this place get in your head." Then he walked off. It was a strange moment, one that broke the invisible wall between inmate and officer, because here, fear didn't care about uniforms. It lived in everyone. Days passed. The aftermath of the riot spread like ripples on water. Search teams tore through cells, confiscating everything, even family photos. Michael found himself sitting alone for hours, just listening. The sounds were different now, softer, uncertain. The whole building felt wounded. He could feel the paranoia in the air, men whispering about who started it, who snitched, who'd get moved next. Everyone was waiting for the next explosion, because in Rikers, nothing ever really ends. That night, the power flickered. The lights went out for just a second, but that second felt endless. Michael froze. Somewhere down the tier, he heard laughter, slow, eerie laughter that echoed through the darkness. Then the lights came back on. But for the first time since he'd arrived, Michael wasn't afraid of the noise. He was afraid of what silence could do. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Don't lose it. Not here. Not like them." Because madness wasn't sudden in Rikers. It crept in quietly, through the walls, through the silence, through the waiting. And somewhere deep down, Michael began to wonder, maybe survival here didn't mean escaping Rikers. Maybe it meant escaping yourself. The box. The cell was 6 feet wide, 8 feet long, a metal bed, a steel toilet, and a light that never went off. They called it the box. And that's where Michael woke up after the riot. He didn't remember being moved there. Just a feeling of cold air on his face and the sound of chains dragging on the floor. His wrists hurt. His head was pounding. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw nothing but gray. Gray walls, gray floor, gray ceiling. A camera sat high in the corner, red light blinking. No window, no sound, just a hum of fluorescent light, and his own breathing. This was isolation, and it felt like time had stopped. At first, Michael tried to count the hours. He made marks on the wall with his fingernail, one for each meal tray that slid through the slot. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. After 3 days, he stopped, because the light never changed, because his body didn't know when to sleep or wake, because even the silence started to sound loud. He began talking to himself just to hear a voice, but even that scared him. He whispered sometimes, "Hey, you still here?" And when he answered back, even in his own head, it made his skin crawl. Every few hours, he'd hear footsteps in the hall, a guard walking by, keys jingling. But they never stopped at his door. Sometimes he'd stand on the edge of his bed, trying to catch a glimpse through the small window in the door. But all he could see was more gray, more emptiness. One night, he thought he heard someone whisper his name. "Michael." He froze, pressed his ear to the door. Silence. He waited. Then the voice came again, softer this time, like a breath on the back of his neck. "Michael." He spun around, heart pounding, but there was nobody there. The air felt heavy, almost alive. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just his mind playing tricks. But that's the thing about the box. The longer you stay, the more your mind stops feeling like your own. On the 5th day, he got his first human contact, a guard delivering his food tray. The slot opened, a paper cup of water, a sandwich wrapped in plastic. Michael stepped forward, desperate for some connection. "Yo, man, How long they keeping me here? No response. Just a blank face through the small window. Then slam, the slot shut. The sound echoed to the cell like a gunshot. That night, Michael lay awake staring at the ceiling. He started imagining shapes in the flickering light, faces in the cracks, voices in the hum of the air vent. He could swear he heard laughter, distant but real. He shouted, "Who's there?" Silence. His heart raced. He pressed his hands to his ears, try and block out the sound that wasn't really there. He wanted to scream. He wanted to sleep. But he couldn't do either. Because in the box, sleep wasn't rest, it was escape. And even that felt dangerous. On the 7th day, he heard a knock. Soft, 3 taps. He froze, unsure if it was real. Then he heard it again, the same rhythm. 3 taps. He walked slowly to the door and tapped back. 3. A pause. Then 3 taps again. There was someone on the other side. He pressed his ear to the door, whispering, "Who are you?" A faint voice answered, "C block. Been here since last month." Michael swallowed hard. His throat was dry. It was the first real voice he'd heard in a week. "Why they put you here?" he asked quietly. "Same reason they put everybody here." The voice said, "They want you to disappear." Then the voice went silent. No more knocks. No more words. Just that sentence echoing in his head. They want you to disappear. Days passed. Michael lost count again. He began pacing in circles, 20 steps from wall to wall, then back again. Sometimes he'd laugh. Sometimes he'd cry. Sometimes he'd just stare at his reflection in the metal toilet and wonder if the man looking back was still him. He started seeing things, shadows moving across the floor that weren't there. He'd blink and they'd vanish. He'd close his eyes and see faces he couldn't remember. That's when the fear shifted. It wasn't about Rikers anymore. It was about himself. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of forgetting he was alive. On the 10th day, the door opened. The sound was so sudden it made him jump. 2 guards stood there, one holding a clipboard, the other with cuffs. "Step forward," one said. Michael blinked in the harsh light of the hallway. His legs felt weak, like he hadn't moved in years. They let him out, but his mind was still inside. He could still feel the walls pressing against him. He could still hear the silence. The box didn't end when the door opened. It followed him. As he walked down the corridor, he saw his reflection in the metal door panels. Pale, sunken eyes, beard uneven, expression blank. He looked like a ghost. And for the first time, he understood why so many never came back the same. He whispered to himself, "Don't disappear. Don't disappear." But deep down, he knew a part of him already had. That night, back in general population, the noise felt deafening. People shouting, laughing, banging on doors. It should have felt like relief. But instead, Michael just sat on his bunk, staring into space. He realized something chilling. Silence wasn't the enemy. It was the echo that came after it. The echo that never left your head. And as the lights went out across Rikers, Michael lay there, eyes open, hands trembling. He could still hear that voice from the box. Michael, only this time, he wasn't sure if it was real, or just a part of him that never made it out. The echo that never leaves. When Michael finally walked out Rikers Island, the sky didn't look the same. It was blue, open, endless, but it felt like a lie. He stood there, clutching a plastic bag with his few belongings. A toothbrush, a worn-out shirt, and papers that said released. People think freedom is when the gates open, but nobody tells you the real prison follows you home. Every sound felt too loud. Every silence too quiet. At night, he'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced he was back in the box. His walls at home looked too close. His ceiling too low. And that humming sound from his old light bulb. It felt just like the one that never went off inside Rikers. He tried to tell people about it. His family said, "Just be grateful you're out." His friends said, "Man, you're strong. You survived it." But they didn't understand. Survival isn't walking out of prison. It's learning how to live after you've already died inside. One night, Michael sat alone on his porch. The neighborhood was quiet, except for a dog barking somewhere far away. And for the first time, he let himself feel everything. The fear, the rage, the guilt, the silence. He realized the box was never just a room. It was a mirror. It showed him who he really was when the world stripped everything away. The noise, the comfort, the distractions. And what he saw scared him, not because it was evil, but because it was empty. He looked up at the sky again, that same sky he saw the day he got out, and whispered, "I'm still here." He didn't say it for anyone else. He said it for the part of himself that almost disappeared. Because in places like Rikers, that's what happens. You don't just lose your time, you lose your sense of self. Piece by piece, day by day. And maybe that's the truth nobody wants to talk about. The system doesn't just punish. It erases. It takes men who are broken and teaches them to stop feeling. It teaches them silence. It teaches them how to disappear while still breathing. And when they come out, society calls them free. But what kind of freedom is it if your mind never left the cell? Michael lit a cigarette, watched the smoke drift into the night, and said something that stuck with me ever since. Prison doesn't end when they open the door. It ends when you stop hearing the silence. He took one last drag, exhaled slow, and smiled. The kind of smile that said he was finally starting to remember what it felt like to be human again. OUTRO voiceover style ending. They say Rikers changes you. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the walls were never built just to keep men in. Maybe they were built to show the rest of the world what happens when humanity is forgotten. And if you listen closely enough, you can still hear it. That low hum in the distance. Not from the lights, not from the cells, but from the souls still trapped inside, waiting for someone to finally hear them. They survived the violence, the hunger, the cold, but it wasn't the walls that broke them. It was the silence. Because inside Rikers, the punishment isn't what they do to your body. It's what they take from your mind.